How's it going, everybody? I hope you guys have all had a great weekend. It was my birthday weekend, so I didn't end up recording. I had a full tier list video recorded, ready to go, uploaded, and then realized I did the stupid thing where I did not check to make sure my headset was working on my new computer. So it was a 40-minute recording that is literally gone, and no one will ever see it. So pretty unfortunate, but we did have a Materia Cup this weekend, and while I wanted to get that up in front of the Materia Cup so that people could use it as like a primer, if you were playing in the Materia Cup, you could use this information for what you wanted to do once you got there, or maybe if you were a stream watcher, you wanted to know exactly what was going to be good at the event. I figured it would be a nice thing to have up. I'll still have one up in the very near future, don't worry about that. And I don't think this weekend changed all that much of what I have as the top decks. Anyways, here was the day one top 16. Obviously, the event is now concluded, so our winning list was Tricolor 6 title. So there are no non-6 characters in this deck. There are no non-6 no non-characters in the list, no summons. Just 50 category 6 cards. We have these lists have not changed all that much. I'm actually a little surprised. Only 13 backups, but because we're on the full 3 Strago and the 3 of new lock, I'm assuming we feel pretty good about digging to find our interceptors, our shadows, our cyans. Maybe we're comfortable just playing off of 2 backups now. That might actually just be a thing that people need to be ready and expecting. This was tricolor, but I believe we're only on about 10 water cards total. Yeah, 10 water cards. I've not necessarily been a fan. Like, I get the idea is that with the Luck 15 and Edgar and Solis, it's not that hard to get the water card back, but I really just feel like the inability to just tap a pair of backups to play Gao, and like having to like have this awkward situation where you're deciding between Strago or Gao or the Fiend, or like if you have a Mog, you can discard it to pay for those. I don't like putting myself in that situation. I do think it's funny we do see the one Kefka here to go with our demons and our fiends. I would love to kind of chat if that ever came up, but it's definitely an interesting list. We're on the full 6 Sabins as well, so we can really get our Sabin special spam off. Only Sabin, Edgar, and Demon as our fire forwards of choice in the deck. It's a lot lower on fire than normal. As far as ice goes, we're on just one of the Yeti Spaghetti, the full 3-3 on locks. We split our Sleezes 2-2. It's a little interesting. I like seeing like at least one of the Sleaze in just as a lethal push. You can kind of slap her down, and then you can just swing in for game late game. And like a 2 CP 5K is a lot better to be negated than like I don't know, trying to resolve a demon if a demon got negated by like an Amaterasu or something. So I like that. I think that looks pretty decent. 2 of number 24. I guess this is just to kind of pad our ice out a little bit, especially since we're not on the Stooges. And then for our water, we're on 2 Gao, 3 Strago, 2 Fiend, and the 3 Mog. I think that's pretty standard. Nothing really stands out. You'd see previously some lists would be on like there was an old Opus 4 Strago they would try to jam, but thanks to the Fiend kind of existing, we don't really need to go that hard on trying to find the right water forwards. Realm also you'll see show up sometimes in these lists, like Realm targeting a Sabin to get more Sabin special fodder is always decent. But I guess that slot kind of went to our Kefka here and like our 3rd demon, which to be fair, we are really low on fire cards. Backups, we got 3 of the 2 most important ones. The 1 extra Gastalian Empire Sid, 2 Shadow, 1 Cyan. I'm surprised. Usually you'll see people flip that just because Cyan, like giving all your forwards Brave for a turn can be relevant in like really aggressive games. And then the 1 Terra as like a removal spell, and I believe one of our only. Oh no, we have 10 EXs. Oh yeah, Lock, Strago, and Terra. This looks really good. I like not playing the title variant because it means that like while I lose the ability to use this lock, it does mean that you ask fewer questions of your backup line. You can run stuff like Andoria, or I like Loperit a lot, but Also, a card like Unicorn in the summon slot goes really, really well in the deck. A card like Amaterasu can help protect you once you get kind of snowballed and get into the lead. But overall, this list is very good, and I see why it won. So major, major props to Todd. I'm looking forward to meeting you at Nationals. Our second place list was a Rydia summons list, and this is a really, really interesting one, actually. So this has been the deck that I've been trying to solve the most, is exactly what are we doing with Rydia now? Obviously, Cecil is a just beyond massive buff to Rydia, but where do we go from there? What's actually good? So we've got the full 3 Rydia, 3 Cecil. We're on a 3-1s for our Paladin splits. I'm actually a little surprised to see that, but I guess because we're not on something like a Loporit, we're only on 2 of the Opus 10 Leviathan, it's actually pretty difficult for us to get Cecils back into the deck. So we might just want it to be guaranteed that we have the Cecil available at all times. We have the 3 Une, the full 3 Garnets as well. Watching Sam play, Sam really did not prioritize getting down backup, so having good multi-element cards actually is going to be really important in that situation, just because you need to be able to play for your Rydia or your Cecils depending on what you're doing. Lastly, we're on a full 3 Riku. This is a card that really hasn't seen a lot of competitive experimentation outside of... I would recommend her as like the budget boss monster for Guardians. Like after your Jex, this card does do very, very well. The EX burst is obviously very powerful, and once you like kind of get set up in Guardians, you can kind of afford to play a slower card. But she does just say Summoner, and there are 6 Summoner forwards in the list, so I was seeing Sam go like a turn 1 Riku to like just threaten it while holding a Rydia or a Garnet in hand. It's not that bad. It's if there's one thing I've learned from 13, it's that committing an early forward with a very, very devastating on-attack trigger while protecting more information in your hand is actually really, really powerful right now. As far as our backups go, we're on the full 3 Aiko, which, because we're on the 3 Rydia, 3 Garnets, makes a lot of sense. The 3 Sarah for the 1 Kolka and the 1 King of Concordia, and then we have also 3 full copies of Claris, really trying to stretch that EX burst count. I'd be a little worried about the Claris. I would maybe go 2 Claris, 2 Kolka, just given that Kolka does represent extra copies of Rydia or Une or Cecil, and Claris doesn't represent much on his own, especially because you're also needing your Sarah to get the King of Concordia as well. Like, there's only so many targets in the deck for these cards to really get profitably, and I feel like Claris is going to run out of targets very quickly. Maybe a 1 copy of Princess Sarah over one of the Clarises would be better as well, because then you could have Sarah get the Princess Sarah, and then Claris can get your Kolka or your King of Concordia, depending on which one you want. But I understand the concept. I just feel like there's not enough targets for Claris to profitably be at 3 copies in the deck. For our summons, we're on the 1 copy of Belias. I haven't seen this played in Rydia a lot, but it does make sense with the 3 Amaterasu and the on-attack trigger of Riku. Even something as simple as going like play Une and then using Rydia, cast Belias for Une to get back an Amaterasu for your opponent's turn could be very, very good. And Belias is also just a really good EX burst too. Good combat trick. Very slept on card, to be honest. Full 3 Kusith. The 1 backup breaking Heka. 2 Mistdragon. I like switching the Kusiths and the Mistdragons here. 2 Kusith, 3 Mistdragon, just given how much of a blowout. Like, you really want to protect your Rydia, and summons are kind of the hardest thing to protect her from. The 3 Leviathan. Or 2 3CP Leviathan. Again, this is one of those cards that I think is going to start to show up a lot more in Rydia lists, given how bricky the Cecils end up being. Ends up allowing you to dig for other things. I've liked using it with Rydia to stack an EX burst on Cecil's entry trigger. So the people that aren't familiar, Cecil dealing you a point of damage is an auto that's done on entry. It is not a condition of the cast. So you can go Rydia, Cecil, Cecil, deal you a point of damage, but on the stack, Rydia gains to 4 counters. Rydia cast Leviathan, draw 2, put a Kusith or a Leviathan or a Remora on top of the deck, and then just win the game on the spot, right? 3 Amaterasu, of course, this is the best card in Rydia. Rydia uses Amaterasu better than any deck in the game. You can kind of get to the lockout state if you have Rydia, Une, and an Amaterasu in the break zone where your opponent just doesn't get to play the card game. Full 3 copies of Mind Flayer. This is one of the more mind-blowing ones to me. No pun intended. I can see this as like 1 or 2, and there's like some really nice synergy with like Riku where you can like bounce your opponents forward and then Mind Flayer to steal it. The downside of that, though, is that you are losing the Riku ability to guarantee you're not hitting an EX burst, which I always find really valuable with a card like Riku or Leviathan. Regardless, like, this is a very high variance card. It's why I tend to stray away from it, even though Rydia does use it very well. You can do a lot of things like steal your opponent's backups. A lot of backups will be relevant to the deck anyway. Stealing, all kinds of really good stuff. But I don't like running this card just because of the variance involved. And lastly, we do have the full 3 copies of Remora. Another one that's a little bit tricky. Definitely like crazy. It's an amazing EX. Rydia as a top end for her. Being able to say kill that and I draw a card for free is really good. But there are going to be situations where your opponent will have out something like Kalmia, and then Remora is just kind of blank for the rest of the game. I ran into that with a Shulk one time. So I've always preferred kind of splitting between Remora and 6CP Levy. The problem here is that 6CP Levy, I mean, it's got like Porom, Garnet, and Riku as targets, and Une, but like obviously your bread and butter is Rydia and Cecil, and it can't recover those. But it's definitely an interesting take on Rydia. It's not really one that I've seen before, which is surprising. I've been really, really trying to make this deck work in the background. I've got a Rainbow variant that I'm very high on. I've got a Twins variant that I'm very high on. I've seen Earth Water that I really, really like as well. But this is very unique. I'm very impressed with the creativity for Sam and his team to kind of come up with whatever this is. Because like I said, the Riku at the full 3 copies as an EX burst top end. And something you'll notice is Rydia is still very well positioned to do well. If you look inside the winning deck list, if the goal was to get a Rydia off the field, I think the only things they can do are either the Strago special or the full board wipe with lock. There's no other way to get that Rydia off the field once she's resolved. Granted, the Fiend kind of can help mitigate a lot of Rydia's card advantage by allowing her to just not have text. But I also think that when a deck has this many EX bursts that say get that turret off the field, I mean, you feel pretty okay at that point, right? Even something like an Une to bounce the Fiend or like a Porom. I like, and again, this is the most represented deck in Top Cut is 6. So a Rydia that's 6 around and resolves is going to be around for a long time in the current meta. Something to keep in mind when you're deck building is think about how many ways you have to get a Rydia off the field once she's resolved. Because if you don't have a lot of ways, you might want to reconsider how deadly that will be to what you're trying to play. So let's go kind of through the rest of these. We have another Tricolor 6. Once again, I think we're going to be on a full... Okay, we're just on 4 locks, one of the original Opus 4 Legend. This pairs really well with this Celise, but we're on 5 Celises, wow. Just 1 copy of this Kefka again. We have 2 demons, 2 fiends, no goddesses. That makes sense for a list like this. The one of number 24, the one of Go-Go, that wasn't in the winning list, if I remember correctly. We did run the 2 Amaterasus. This is a Rudrose style list where you run enough Amaterasus to threaten it, even though it does make the lock potentially have a like 1 in 20 chance to whiff. I'm sure there are going to be games where the lock does whiff because of the Amaterasu, but I really love the flexibility of being able to threaten. Just guarantee, 48, 6 characters. We did go full 3-3-3-3 on all of our backups. That makes sense. Maybe 1 Terra to kind of get back the Amaterasu on an EX burst, but I like the higher backup quantity here. I feel like it was just the Terra, isn't it? Yeah, compared to the winning list. So here is Wait Until You Meet My Exes. This is like a mono lightning control is like the best way I can put what this deck is. And it's another really interesting one. So This also did well at one of the store championships. Essentially, the idea is you have two backup engines between the President Shinra and Louiswa to get two backups down to enable Weaver, which is good because Lightning hasn't had a great way of getting backups down in mono for a long time, which is why Weaver is actually doing quite well here. And when you kind of get those backups down, cards like Shinryu, cards like Idia get a lot better. Even stuff like, you can cast a 7 CP Odin if you're doing it off of your backups and one card in hand. Hyo gets very good if you have a mono backup line, mono lightning backup line, right? So I think this is a really interesting list. I like some of the changes to the EXs. I think for this 5 CP Ramu, if you're going to cast this one, why are we doing damage when we can outright break, especially with cards like Rydia in the format? Like, the cards that resist damage are a lot higher than the cards that resist outright break, right? So I would be running more copies of this than the damage Ramu. But I almost wonder, like, sure, a lot of this list feels very kind of solved. I think this list actually looks pretty tight on slots, but I would like to see some experimentation with the old Opus 17 Aphmau, because I think that getting the ability to run Fire Alphino is more than worth running two kind of meh backups. Like, Reno, Root, and Alphino are backups effectively that have no text, right? You are never using the actual job text on any, or the card text on any of these. They're just 2 CP searchable backups. So if we're doing that, we should just run the 4 CP Sildra for lightning backups. Like, you get 2 meh lightning backups for 4 CP, but you also get to keep the body, and she has like extra ramifications of being able to float CP, which is really nice in a deck with this many backups, right? So I would personally like to see it experimented with that direction a little bit. But I definitely this list looks really interesting and really cool. Would not be surprised if this devolved into Fel Thanos control kind of regularly, in which case I almost would like to see the Windishtola in the list, because most decks only have maybe 2 to 3 answers to Fel Thanos. The exceptions to that being Waterless, for the most part, will be able to handle Fel Thanos better than most, but even they don't necessarily like seeing him on the field, right? And in that situation, if you can go like Fel Thanos and then the next turn go Alize, revive the Windishtola, then the Fel Thanos is going to be very difficult to remove. Ice Lightning will be completely unable to kill the Fel Thanos. Fire is going to have to Amaterasu Fel Thanos' trigger, which again they don't necessarily want to do. I think that's like really, really, really key. But yeah, like Fel Thanos control is, I think, a very legit strategy. This is one of our first decks running triple Shinryu, by the way. This card came up really big all weekend. Saw a lot of decks playing this card. So keep an eye out on it. I think this is going to sneak up on a lot of people with just how playable this card actually came out. So this is 13. Yeah, kind of like the Eureka style with Seymour at 2 copies, but we have stuff like the Phoenixes, the Amaterasus. New Ramu is really nice in 13. Kind of dull the big threats like your Warrior of Lights out of the way while also hasting in to get like the extra damage. The one of Estinian as well as like a nice little top end finisher. I like playing cards in 13 that are like, cost about 2, maybe 4. Estinian's ability to warp himself off of a top deck and then threaten 2 damage on the turn he comes in is very, very important for this deck, in my opinion. Is that the right Squall? Huh. Usually you see the legend, the Opus 16 legend. I don't hate this. I think the idea being that you can block out blockers, which again can deal with stuff like Warrior of Light, but I've always liked the Cleave Squall with the Vanille special has always been one of my favorite little things to do. No Alizes in the list to pair with the Ishtola. That's interesting to note. I don't like Susano in here at all, by the way. We're not getting enough backups down to consistently use this. This feels a little bit out of place. Small note, by the way. If I say something negative about your list, obviously I wasn't there. I don't know the room as well, and I didn't top the event. So I could be very wrong on some of these, but I want to give my honest opinions and kind of review the things that I liked and didn't like. If I talk and say I would prefer to run a different card there, that's not me talking about any specific players as their deck choices or anything like that. Just that I would consider different options in those slots. The Susano here being a very good example of a card that there are probably situations where having Susano access could win them the game, but I think there's a lot of situations where Susano is going to brick them because they're not going to have a backup to use with it, and it's a 6 EP vanilla without that. So, I mean, 13 is still a very potent deck. This is just dual color 6 featuring the full 3/3 locks. The one Kefka again showing up. I wonder if that's going to stay in or if that's going to fall out over time. It's a very unique one. Like 4 CP 9k ping is very good. We got multiple Sabins. We have the full 3 Leos as well, because we can't run Fiend in this variant. With the demons and our Edgars and everything else, and maybe we can protect our Leo long enough to win against Rydia. Rydia, I think, should actually have good matchups into 6 in general. I know it didn't play that way out on stream in the finals, but I think the inability to get a Rydia off the field, like this list literally can't kill a Rydia outside of the lock party. So, yeah, we are on the 1 of the sleaze and then 3 of the sleaze. And then once again, we're on 13 backups. We're on 2-2, 3-3-3. This was what I think was considered to be standard by the end of the set for the Opus 15 title lock decks. More 6. This is Earth Lightning 14, like Scions. Basically kind of playing off of Minfilia being a good card. Minfilia can get you your Ishtola or your Alize. Again, we're playing the Alfino backup. I can't get behind that. Like, we've got so many good backup engines already. We have just unparalleled access to getting Scions, especially in Earth Lightning, that I would love to see like 2 copies of the Fire Alfino to pair with our Alizes and just turn it into Alize Revive Alfino is a 2 CP discount on Shinryu while getting 2 bodies that further your game plan, right? 2 Shantoto, 2 Miner. This is our first time this card's shown up. 16 backups. I'd be a little worried about a whiff, but I don't think it would be super, super likely. Reeve, Louisoix, the 1 of Rydia to help get our Mist Dragons or our Hekkas. I think 1 copy of Ixion would go a long way, maybe over like 1 of the Mist Dragons, just to deal with some of those low costs. And Ixion is almost entirely one-sided because of how few of these we have. The 1 of Kuja, Dragoon, and Alfino. If you get both Dragoons, you can tap a Dragoon, sack it to get the other Dragoon back. I think you could even actually use Dragoon targeting himself too, but that might not be the case. Don't quote me on that. If you can crack it to target himself, this makes a lot of sense as the Lightning. There's not a lot of good Lightning 14 backups, so Dragoon would make sense for that. We also have the Areneas in here, so this makes a lot more sense then. Because I don't think you can crack Dragoon without a target in the break zone already. But if you can go Dragoon, get back on Aranea, that's a way of getting value while still maintaining the extra buff for Graha. The Kadaj, the one of what are the brands getting? We're getting we have the Ignises in here. I didn't even see that. Ignis is a very, very good card, and a lot of our backups are pretty breakable. That's the wrong Reeve. That is absolutely the wrong Reeve. I imagine this was 4 CP Reeve instead, which would make a lot more sense. Look at the top 3, add a card from among them. But Alfino is no, not breakable. Dragoon is breakable. The 2 Miners are both breakable. Minfilia is breakable. And I think Minfilia even has a decent chance of getting to be able to use her effect to break and break a forward. This is just a fantastic EX burst as well. This looks like a pretty nice list, honestly. So here is our first Ice Lightning. We're on, but it is Turks. This is like hard Turks. Wow. Because we're on the full, like, 5 copies of each Reno and Rude. Um, these ones are interesting to me in this list just because I don't think it's even possible for us to have. Yeah, we can't have 4 Turks on the field in this list. So these are mostly special fodder then. Our deck is 39 7 characters, by the way, so Cloud gets us just about anything we could want. Restrictor, Narrow, Weiss. We have the 3 Lightnings, the 3 Sephiroths. Love seeing how many of these are being played in multiples. Reeve, Kate Sith, and 2 Vincents. Would like to see the 3rd Zeromus come in just because Zeromus is such a debilitating card to play against. Like, I would maybe cut like one of the starter. Probably the Reno. I feel like the Reno special is the less good between the Reno and the Rude. But yeah, this looks. Oh, we do have the Seng. Seng, Cisne. We do have access to it if we have exactly Cisne, Reno, Rude, and Seng on field. Don't know how likely that is. I would be also afraid then of what's our Turk count? 15. So we have, let's see, 49 cards. Reveal 5. Turks, we have 14 left in the deck after the first one resolves. And we can have a max of 5 on the reveal. 82% chance to hit. So like a 1 in 5 to miss on the Seng is a little scary. The full 3 Estinian as well. Estinian plus Alcid is actually kind of nasty, now that I think about it. Warp the Estinian, play Alcid next turn. Estinian attacks twice and dulls 2 forwards to clear the way for other stuff. This looks solid, but again, another list that's going to struggle to deal with Iridia. Cloud is the only out to Iridia in this list, I believe. I guess Sephiroth and the Lightning can do it, but they're a lot more expensive. But yeah, so Sephiroth and Cloud are the outs to Iridia in the list. Otherwise, she's sticking around. Sephiroth can do it pretty easily, though. So we have a mono wind list. Interestingly, I would have expected to see like 3 Shinryus in this just to try to slow the game state down. So for our backups, we're on the Norstalin engine with targets of Stiltskin and Nash. And then we have the Chocobo engine with Chocobo Sam, Fat Chocobo, Chocolate, and Chocobo. Okay, that makes sense. And then we have the one of Sid Polendina to go get our Rosa. Okay. Decent enough. Can't complain there. I definitely feel the lack of Althea, but you do what you have to do now. Nash does present an out to Setzer, which is good. Getting rid of Setzer in 6 can be pretty bad for that deck. Forwards, 2 Luso, the 1 Izana, the 1 Ash, 2 Zidane, 2 Rosa, and then 3 each of Fina, Lulu, and Bismarck. Evray Atomos, the full 3 Typhon. This looks like a pretty well constructed mono win list. We did manage to fit a lot of extra, I say a lot, but we have the full 3 Chocobo, 3 Alexander, so wind is really hurting for good EXs, so just anyone that you can add is worth it. Very surprised to see the deck without Yuffie, actually, now that I think about it. But Yuffie does have a large deck slot commitment, so maybe by not having that, we can run a lot more stuff like the full 3 Dryads and the extra EX bursts, and just try to generally race our opponent down. So I'm interested. I'm very interested. I would love to chat and see what Michael was had in mind with this. So this is 13.5. Yeah, we have 5 copies of Ishtola in here to go with the 3 Alizés, the 1 Estinian. We're on the Grahas, so we're on the Red Mages and the Summoners. So yeah, this is like the 13.5 list. No Alfino to revive to get like a search. I've always liked that as a tech. The 3 Sid Reigns. Yeah, When you run all the 13 card or the 14 cards, you kind of run out of space. So we're just on the Amaterasu and the Bahamut's, but I kind of like it anyway. Meath lets us kind of toolbox into any of these that we want. I like that as well. The full 3 saws to dodge, I think that's going to really be important just given the way that Xenos is a problem for the deck. I think being able to get that first backup down matters a lot more now. I like it. I think this is a good list. This is about, if I were to template what to build if I was to build a 13.5 list, I think this is about what I would recommend. Maybe something over the Sid Reigns, but other than that, I like it. This is Mono Earth Monster Warrior of Light? Question mark. Brian was cooking, apparently. I guess we can go like Montleonis with a bunch of monsters on field to revive Warrior of Light. We have Genova Synthesis, which is also revivable. Like, this is, yeah, just kind of Montleonis, Leo deck featuring Warrior of Light and a metric crap ton of monsters. Let's see. So for our backups, we have Claris, Kolka, Epitaph. We got all of our kings we have access to. We're on Amber Shinju as another backup engine. 2 Animists for all of our monsters. The Leatherworkers, because again, there's not enough good Earth backups for a mono list. Leatherworkers really good in that sense. This Leo could get very big very quickly with the sheer number of multiplayable monsters here. Something like the Gigas FFCC, like we could have 2 behemoths on field and a zombie. And yeah, I would want to experiment with this one a little bit. This is a really interesting, cool list. Very creative, for sure. So this is Black Waltz Megissa. Yeah. Looks like a pretty normal Megissa list. Hedgehog Pie is a big addition for Megissa because she can now, on her first character search with the Alphino, she can get Hedgehog Pie and just be guaranteed to have it for like the next 3 times she wants to ping herself. New Ifrit as well is a big addition to the list. This looks pretty similar, even down to, I remember seeing a list that had this Ifrit exactly in the deck. Yeah. We have more Turks. This is Turks, like hard Turks, to the point we're on Legendary Turk even. 23 total Turks in the list, a full 3/3 of both Root and Renos. The full 3 Elenas. Yeah, this is hard Turks featuring Shinryu, Felthanos. No Al Cid, I'm a little surprised to see. We have no Weiss. We have Johnny Zale. Zale gets us. We're on this Rufus. No. We're really playing this Rufus. Huh. There's no self-damage in the list. I would expect to see like some form of self-damage if we're playing this one. That is really interesting. Yeah, 2 copies of that Rufus. That is interesting. Yeah, I didn't expect to see this guy ever see the like. To be fair, a 9K First Strike Brave is really good in an aggro meta. It's very hard for 13, for example, to get over this card. And with Legendary Turk added to the mix, the Revival trigger could very easily get 4 forwards out of the break zone and onto the field with damage 5. Technically 6 if you don't have a Cisne in play yet either. And the Rude Reno for the Lightning ones, they do push for game very easily. So, interesting. I'd be curious to see which ones that they like. Maybe like early game, or if you want to rush them down, you go for the ice rooted Reno, and if you're trying to go for like the late game push, you prioritize the lightning ones. I've not seen Legendary Turk ever seeing play. I kind of love seeing this guy because he just the sunglasses with the cigar and like the Tweewee style art. I always think is really kind of fun to watch, but the card itself has not proven to be the craziest yet. Maybe it's better than people are giving it credit for. And then lastly, this is probably the wildest list that topped. We have a Sid 2 sighting. So if you haven't seen it, Sid 2 lets you search for a backup, cost 1, add it to your hand. I imagine the most important target is going to be Spiritus because this is a very heavy crystal list. But we're on a full 3 Geomancer and 3 Thief package to try to get all of our stuff down, along with 3 Dragoon and 3 Oracle. And then we have just all kinds of crazy. Let's look at the summons real quick. The one we're prioritizing the most is Atomos, which makes sense. We're generating a lot of crystals. We can spend 2 in a turn with Spiritus. We get a refund on 1. Atomos for 1 mana is ludicrously good. Alexander at 1 makes a lot of sense. And in any control deck, I could really see this Fat Chocobo doing pretty well. Alexander means that we have another monster out and an EX person draws a card, and Cucullin is just generally a nice thing to have access to. 2 Porums, that makes a lot of sense with our Lenas. It's one of the best revival targets for it. The 2 Null, 1 Null, also again a nice card to get access to with that Lena. 1 Alice the Ensorcelled. We do have the Rosa to activate her every turn. I don't know that I think that's enough to feel confident in that. It's a really, really cool card if you can get her to get her triggers off every turn. But Venera, obviously a really good card. Excuse me. Lena, the full 3 Sarah Mobius. This could potentially draw a lot of cards in this deck. We have 7 crystal generating backups, and Spiritus can generate them over the course of a turn. You could even do something like, if you spend a crystal over like previously in the turn, you can spend the second crystal. Spiritus triggers in the end phase, which allows the Sarah Mobius to get you another reveal for another card, basically for free. Actually, that's a really, really cool combo. I think that's like super cool. The 3 Glaciella, of course. The 1 Maquis to go with our 1 Alice. I think that's a little too cute. Definitely a lot of potential again for this to do well, but I would rather see something a little more consistent. We have our 2 Legend Edges to go with 2 Rosas and the full 3 Paladin Cecils. These 2 form a really good loop where you can spend the crystal and then generate it with Edge immediately, which if you have the Sarah Mobius on field is also just a reveal again. You could then just spend the crystal with Sarah to reveal again in the end phase if you have the Spiritus in play. A lot really depends on if we get to Spiritus early and often. That's really what I'm kind of deciding with this list. The 2 Dario to go with our Glaciellas. Dario is just kind of like a sticky forward with a really nutty special. The only thing, and again this has just always been kind of true, is that it takes a lot for the special on another BE character to be better than Surefire Burst. Dario does let you target down backups. That's the big difference, is that Dario lets you attack your opponent's backups, and Glaciella can't do that. Lastly, we have 1 copy of the Goddess. We're running both of Wynn's newly acquired board wipes to try to slow the game state down. So we're trying to draw just a gazillion cards with Sarah Mobius and generate crystals with Spiritus and all of those, so that we have a recursive, unbeatable board state. Late or like mid-range style late game with Cecil, Edge, and Glaciella. Is that enough? Maybe. I think the forwards could definitely use a lot of TLC. There's a lot of cards. Like I said, the Alice and Maquis seem a little bit like they wouldn't be my favorite duo. I might remove those, which then means that we don't necessarily need to run the Rosas. We could then bump the Porums up a little bit, maybe run like the new Rosa, for instance, I think is actually a pretty good card. There's an EX Rosa that searches Cecil, and I think so much of the deck relies on Cecil that if we can't see him naturally, we're going to be struggling a little bit. So maybe cleaning that up a little bit. Anytime I'm in wind and water, I still want access to every Atomos. Just like a 1-1 line of those two. And like, especially with the one cost backups, Atomos gets a lot of value when you can say, tap a backup, play a backup, activate two backups. Like you just like kind of get off to the races when you do that. And our backups are so cheap that we can get a lot of value off of an early Atomos, right? And I think Atomos is even Atomos is category 5, isn't he? Because he's searchable with Sildra, or was searchable with Sildra. So, even something like the Evray to activate the Spiritus, so you can use Spiritus's buff ability and just kind of get the world's largest Cecil or like Dario with a damage reduction effect, then like also gaining 5,000 power, means he's not leaving the field under any circumstances, right? So like maybe that's what I would do. I would just cut the Alice and the Maquis for Evray Atomos here, and then maybe commit like get rid of the Alexander for the extra Cucullin. Would be nice, I think. Really, really interesting list. It's kind of the one that I think I'm gonna have to like actually play to fully evaluate. But it's a really, really cool, unique list. Major props. I don't think anybody had a deck like this on their radar. This like wind, water, crystals deck. It's like partly 4 and partly just glacialic control. But either way, super, super cool. I think that's going to cover all of the Materia Cup for Portland. I almost said Portugal. Let me know what you guys thought. If there were any super interesting lists that y'all had. Camera was bumped a little bit there. Whoops. And yeah, let me know what y'all think.